Shalom. Shalom to the brethren. And what up to everybody else? This is your Op, Brandon Lewis. And this is the Lunar Solar Shabbat Scripture Study, where we search the scriptures looking for ways to apply them to life that we might become perfect. Too long have we read a scripture here and a scripture there, creating whole doctrine, never knowing the fullness of the context of those scriptures, the fullness and the context of those chapters and those books. And we have ignorantly made them say things that they did not say, made them intend things that they did not intend. May we now read them in the fullness, in the context that they were meant to be read in, and know what they were intended to teach us.
Hallelujah. Abinu, Shaba Shamayim, Itkuda Shamka, Tabua Malkutka, Yasha Ratsunka, Kaba Shamayim Kan Ba Arat, Atlacham, Akunutan, Lanu Hayum, Usalach Lanu, Al Khataim, Kapisha Sul Khimgam, Anachnu, Lachat Aim Lanu, Ual Dabian, Lidi Nasayun, Ki Amkhalsan Manhara, Ki Laka Hamamlaka, U Hagabura, U Hatap Arat, Launi, Aulamin. Abinu Yahweh, we thank you for this moon, for this opportunity to represent you, and we ask that you send your Ruach HaKodesh to envelop and just cover this entire platform, cover our mouths, our hearts, our minds, and everything in this dealing that is to represent you, so that we speak only your words, so that we represent you in the fullest of Yahweh. We thank you. We ask for your protection and your covering as we go throughout these days and these trials, as we fight off these spirits that try to attach themselves to us, and as we build up our community and our nation in you, Abinu Yahweh. Through you, all things are made new. Through you, all things are possible. And we thank you for your word, for your truth, for your understanding, your binah, and for your wisdom, your chakmah, that we may apply these things to our lives and we may walk closer with you. We thank you, we thank you, we thank you. We tahila you, we rumamu you always and forever. Ulam, hallelujah.
Deep down in the ghetto, where the chosen ones were led. Deep down in the ghetto, where the real Hebrews have fled. Deep down in the ghetto, and there's a remnant rising up. Deep down in the ghetto, we finding out the world was made for us.
I live in a society where it's hardly any sobriety, and women all dressed immodestly. As for my people, we get oppressed economically. Plus, it's a war being fought mentally and psychologically. It's hard to see unless you walk in this light. See, knowledge my brass knuckles, and I can't hear the fight. Ain't talking about strife, I'm talking getting families right. If my death could bring 1,000 to repentance, let me die tonight. Prayfully, I die in Christ as a living sacrifice, acceptable and worthy to live again in the afterlife. Hungry hungry for the word, I got an appetite. From here on out, I'm just trying to live pure like a Nazarite. I see my people killed, that's a sad sight. They gave us white Jesus, that's the Antichrist. All these fake black leaders living the lavish life, while my people get cheated more than the past is right. Deep down in the ghetto,
where the chosen ones were led. Deep down in the ghetto, where the real Hebrews have fled. Deep down in the ghetto, and there's a remnant rising up. Deep down in the ghetto, we finding out the world was made for us.
I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I'm sick of these devils that's trying to trick our mind. I'm sick of marching for justice and never getting none. I'm sick of watching our mothers cry over dead sons. I'm sick of being depressed about the things I regret. I'm sick of working for a check, paying my bills and got nothing left. I'm sick of being oppressed. Got me hot as I battle my flesh, looking for shade in the shadow of death. The more I gain, the more I lose as I follow the prophet's shoes. We got a big job to do, but at least we ain't confused. We said life or death before you win or lose, you gotta choose. A light should go up, but first you must change your fuse. We just trying to get healed for all the pain we done felt all these years. When the Son of God come back and wipe all of our tears and take death out the land and all of our fears, Lord, destroy our enemies and take us up out of here, out the ghetto.
All right. Shalom, shalom to the brethren. What up to everybody else? We give all praises to the Most High, the creator of the heavens and the earth, the seas, and everything in them. And we also give appreciation to his son, his chosen representative, Yahushua HaMashiach, who the world knows as Jesus Christ. And Shabbat Shalom to those of you that know about such things. And what up to those of you who don't. But 1 second. Today we are talking about, hold on, son. Hold on. Daddy, no. Today we're talking about, let me get some of this out y'all way. All right, boy. You don't run nothing, son. Hold on a second. Hold on. Come on. Today we're talking about, is the transatlantic slave trade false? Were the slaves the indigenous peoples of the Americas? And this is part 1. This is going to be a series because there is a lot to talk about and a lot to cover, right? Looking into the histories of the Americas, the slave trade, the wars, and the laws made against the slaves and Indians. And or is what they should be. And or Indians, right? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Most High willing. I did kind of rush this whole thing, right? I should have had it a little further out, but I needed to study something today. I needed to talk about something today, so why not bring this out? Because I believe this is very needed in this time. It's a lot of questions that I've had about where is the land, right? In this Hebrew Israelite awakening, or the quote unquote Black Hebrew Israelite awakening. we have learned that a lot of lies have been told by those in power, for those in control over history, over artifacts and all this stuff, and that there is no limit to the lies in which these people will tell and have told. So in keeping in that, we have to start to question everything, right? We have to question all the things in which we have been taught and all the things that we have been shown. We do know that Psalms 83 says that the nations are confederate. Hey, son. Hey. Look at the peoples. Look at the peoples. Look at the peoples. They don't want to hear you crying. This is Nakumya, right? That is the Hebrew of Nehemiah. This is Nehemiah, Yahuda, and he wants a nipple right now. That's why he's trying to eat my face. He's looking for his mother's breast, but he'll be all right. So anyway, this journey of mine started. Well, I had heard about that America is true Egypt and true Israel, and it's the place of the of the Bible, right? I had heard about all this, heard about the rivers and heard about the mountains, and a lot of that being able to be placed here. Now, of course, when you say something like that, it's a lot of questions, right? Because a lot of this is geared towards the transatlantic slave trade, right? Deuteronomy 28, we was brought into Egypt on ships, right? And the whole ship thing is about the whole slavery thing. We do know for a fact that our people have been enslaved in America, right? We do know that. The narrative is that we were brought from somewhere else here, right? We were brought from Africa here. Now, we supposedly fled from Israel into Africa, and in Africa, we were enslaved and brought here by the millions. Now, if one were to say that America is here, right? Now, it was said we would go into captivity into all the nations, into slavery in all the nations, right? So, one would have to prove that we were enslaved here. One also would have to give some kind of understanding of our DNA being found still in Africa. There are tribes over in Africa that have our DNA, right? You got the Igbo, you got, some would say the Ethiopians, you got, Guyanese. Now we have bloodline relatives in Africa that have been there for hundreds of years. That's a fact. There's no getting around it. So one would have to prove, how did those people get to Africa if they was from here? I went on quite the frenzy of screenshots. Okay? Quite the frenzy of screenshots, and I have them for you. All right? Receipts, if you will. Now, I have my little son, and he is quite cute, but I can't do this presentation with him acting how he's acting. So hold on one second. Everybody, he is home. Hi, Daddy. I hope that ain't cause a real problem. Hi, hey, son. All right, and we're back. First of all, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Follow my page on Facebook, whether you are on Life of an Israelite or Brandon Lewis. So yeah, one would have to prove how did the Africans that are in Africa, who are our bloodline, how did they get over there, right? And one would have to prove that the slaves were the Indians and that the Indians were the slaves. You know what I'm talking about? So let's get right on into it. Shout out to my sis, Nakaya Brown, right? Nakaya Brown is a singer. She is from the Americas, but she currently resides in Israel, right? The sis is very passionate about our people. And recently, Spain has gone through some troubles, right? All kinds of troubles in the past months, right? It's been things in the government, and it's been a lot of natural disasters. Most recently, there has been a flood. And sis correlated the fact that Spain played a very large role in the slave trade, right? Very large role in the slave trade. So the city that the sis posted in Spain was a major slave auction hub for slaves. So me, in my mind, I say, if the Americas is where Israel is, and all of the slaves came from here, that means slaves would have had to have been sent from here to there. So I looked up. Let's get right on into it. Let's get right on into the business. You know what I'm talking about? No further ado on these receipts, brethren. Okay, we're going to get right on into the receipts. Like I said, I went on quite the screenshot frenzy. And hold on. I don't think it's shared up. Yeah, it's shared up. It's shared up. We got action. Quite the frenzy of screenshots. So let's get on into it. So this is the post. This is the post that sis put up. Wow. I have been having some issues with the now it don't want to act right. Ain't that something? Hold on, y'all. Okay, there we go. Okay, this is what sis posted, right? Pardon me while I get this whole thing figured out here. All right. Okay. Here we go. Slavery in Spain. Slavery in Spain began in the 15th century and reached its peak in the 16th century, right? That is the 1400s, okay? Because each century is counted behind, right? The 15th century is the 1400s, and the 16th century is the 1500s. So the 15th century reached its peak in the 16th century. The history of Spanish enslavement of Africans. Now, throughout the reading of this, I need you to understand something. I need you to understand is that these people are going to use words and terms, and they're going to lie. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to read between the lines and read this from the perspective of these people are hiding something, which I shall prove. Okay, the history of Spanish enslavement, the history of Spanish enslavement of Africans began with the Portuguese captains Antao Goncalves. Now, I don't know how to read these Spanish names, but I'm going to try. Tristão in 1441 is what I'm talking about the centuries. The 15th century is the 1400s. He started this in 1441. The first large group of African slaves, made up of 235 slaves, came with Lancarat de Freitas 3 years later. In 1462, Portuguese slave traders began to operate in Seville, Spain. This is the place of our interest here, Seville, Spain. During the 14 and 1700s, Spanish merchants began to trade large numbers of slaves. Slaves were auctioned at market at a cathedral, brethren, and subsequently transported to cities all over imperial Spain. This led to the spread of Moorish, African, and Christian slavery in Spain. These are the groups participating in the slavery. By the 16th century, 7.4% of the population of Seville, Spain was slaves. Many historians have concluded that the Renaissance and early modern Spain had the highest amount of African slaves in Europe. This is what the sister posted. Okay. And when she posted this, it caused me to look up indigenous Indians in Seville, Spain. Let's see what that says here. This is what I looked up. Seville, Spain, a legacy of indigenous slavery. Let's get right on into it. Okay. See if I can get some more of this. They won't let me give you no more. Okay. Standing outside of Seville Cathedral, I debated whether or not to enter. Okay, we're going to skip all this. We're going to skip that. Skip that. Okay. This is just a part of the article. I told you I was screenshotting. Okay. I'm a screenshotter. Screen shooter. Hold on. I won't let me click over. All right. Let's click over to the other one. All right. We're talking about Columbus here. And I think these are backwards. Okay. On the voyage, Columbus took back 200 Taino. 200 Taino. These were survivors. Originally, there were about 1,600 captives in the group. As the belly of the ships continued not to hold all of them, Columbus parceled out the Taino to his cronies, setting up Spanish colonies in the Caribbean. About 560 Taino, these are the Indians. We're going to get into who these Taino Indians were. But these were Indians from the Americas that Christopher Columbus took back to Spain. About 560 Taino left for Spain, shackled in the belly of the ships, lulled by the ocean, tormented by Spanish whips. Every day, Taino bodies were tossed overboard. Don't that sound like what they said they did to the Africans coming over here? By the time the ships arrived in Spain, less than half the original number of Taino were alive. So, as early as Christopher Columbus's voyage, Indians have been transported from the Americas back to Spain and also to Africa, which we shall read here in a moment. This says here, Taino were different. They were the first people from the New World Where did they come from, brethren? Where did the Taino come from? The New World, to walk the Seville streets and straight to the auction block. This is the one I should have read first, I think. On his first voyage back from the newly encountered Caribbean, Columbus returned with 6 Taino against their will. They were presented to King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella as proof that the New World was across the oceans. Okay, this is his first trip back to Spain after coming to the Americas. After this trip, he goes back and gets 560 more. Well, actually, he got 1,600 more. He got 1,600 more, right? And only 560 made it there. No, 200 out of the half of the original number were alive. Okay. He only arrived with 230 Tainos out of about 1,600. So just the voyage from the Americas to Spain, he left with 1,600, only made it there with 230. That's how bad it was. And they expect us to believe they transported millions of slaves here. But anyway, continuing on. What is going on? It won't let me do what I'm trying to do here. All right. Slave trade. Okay, here we go. Slave trade in Spain. I did do these backwards. But let's just continue reading some of these screenshots I have here for you. Indigenous slaves in Spain. This is not the kind of information that appears in tourist brochures and websites in Seville. I had to come to the marvelous city to admire the legacy of Moorish rule. We got to understand too, the Moors, who people love to love, right? Everybody want to talk about the Moors. The Moors were the rulers of Spain in this time, and the Moors played a key part in slavery. Moorish rule, the Alcazar Palace, the winding streets and cathedral, which started out life as a mosque. My tour was self-guided, meaning that I wandered around following anything in any street that caught my eye. The tour was going well until I met Christopher Columbus. Seville, Cordoba, and Cadiz were the 3 largest slave markets in Spain in the 1500s. That slavery was the ancient and a holdover from the millennia-old Muslim something. So let's continue on. Okay, now I want to act right. Okay. I asked the question. I said, why were Indians sent to Africa? Because we're talking about Africa now. As a matter of fact, hold on. Let's jump back. Let's jump back for a second. Let me make sure this is being shared correctly. Okay, it's being shared. It's being shared correctly. Let's jump back here. And let's jump down here about how did Indians even get to Africa? I asked the question, has Indians ever been to Africa? First I asked, had they been to Spain? Indigenous Indians, had they ever been to Spain? Then I asked, have Indians ever been to Africa? Let's read. Let's take a gander. I don't know what's going on here. Okay. Historically, while not a large-scale practice, some Native Americans referred to as Indians in the historical context were indeed, brethren, when have you heard about Indians being shipped to Africa? When? Answer me this, riddle me this, Batman. When have you heard it? Huh? How, Sway? Some Native Americans referred to as Indians in historical context, were indeed sent to Africa as slaves, primarily during the colonial era. So what they're saying is that as far back as the 14 and 1500s, Indians have been getting shipped to Africa, where they were often shipped by European colonists to work on plantations in places like the Caribbean and parts of North Africa. You heard what Jamie Foxx said, Africa. Okay? Particularly during conflicts. It don't want to act right, brethren. I don't know what's going on. Particularly during conflicts with the Native American tribes. However, the vast majority of slaves transported across the Atlantic during the slave trade were from Africa. See, this is the thing. They know it's proof that slaves went to Africa, that slaves or Indians went to Africa, and that Indians went to Spain. So they have to admit it. Because if they deny it altogether, when you find out the proof, you're going to be like, why did they deny it like that? And they still trying to keep the Africa lie going. Let me come back on screen for a second. We got to talk about it. I got something I want to say to you. For a second. Hold on. Listen here. We believe the white man lied about so much stuff. He lied about who the true children of Israel is. He lied about the earth being round. He lied about, language, culture. He lied about, the Egyptians. He lied about so much stuff. Anything he is behind, you should question. He's behind the white man being the Israelites, right? He's behind the black man coming from Africa. You say, you know what? We didn't come from Africa. We came from Israel. And the only reason you say that is because of the white ones in that place over there. Because they chose it. Because there's artifacts and stuff there. That's why you believe it. You don't know this man. You don't know that this man controlled the artifacts, do you? Do you know he controlled the artifacts? Do you know they could make a Jerusalem and put it there? Don't you know they could make one? Don't you know they could build one? Do you know that the pyramids that we see, do you know those are the reconstructed pyramids? And then he'll turn around and tell you that they don't know we don't know how the pyramids was made. Nigga, you reconstructed them. They don't want to tell you that. But anyway, continuing on. All right. Let's get back to the business. Colonial exploitation. European colonists often enslaved Native Americans during conflicts, capturing them and selling them as slaves in the different regions. Now, let's go back here. Let's go back here and see what we got. Okay? Because what we got here is a misunderstanding, and we're going to get some reckoning. Okay? We're going to get some reckoning to the misunderstanding. So let's find out about this little situation here. Let's find out about slaves getting all up in Africa. About Indians, Native Americans getting all up in Africa. Let's find out about it. A study by Linford D. Fisher, associate professor at the history at Brown University, finds that Native Americans, including non-combatants who surrendered during King Philip's War to avoid enslavement, were enslaved at nearly the same rate as captured combatants. Native American slavery is a piece of the history of slavery that has been glossed over, Fisher said. Don't nobody want to talk about it. Why don't nobody want to talk about it? Between 1492 and 1880, is that not 390 something years, 380 something years worth of transporting Indians to Africa? When they told you this? Between 1492 and 1880, between 2 to 5.5 million Native Americans were enslaved in the Americas, in addition to 12.5 million African slaves. Remember, you got to be smart, okay? And remember, you got to deny this whole African narrative. How they enslaved 5.5 million Africans, but only, Indians in a land that they supposedly completely took over and managed to enslave 12.5 millions in Africa. How does that work? So you got to read between the lines, brethren. You got to see the forest for the trees. We just getting started. We going to get much deeper. You understand me? We only tapping the surface right now because we still have to find out about the Tainos. Okay, we still got to get into this the Taino question. Okay, and the Taino question is going to get you. You know what I'm talking about? While natives had been forced into slavery and servitude as early as 1636, it was not until King Philip's War that the natives were enslaved in large numbers. Fisher wrote in the study, in 1675 and 1676, war pitted Native American leader, Native American leader King Philip. They don't talk about this King Philip. I thought they was talking about the king like he was a king in like Spain or something. This is a Native American king here, known as Metacom. So that's all I got on that right there. So now we see now that Indians were in fact made into slaves. We see that Indians were in fact sent to Spain. We see that Indians were in fact sent to Africa. So for all of you Deuteronomy 28s that's so stuck on it, you could still have your Deuteronomy 28 and still be from the Americas, okay? So please hush up on that. Because a lot of you, as soon as you go to talk about America being a place, your heart broke. But what about Deuteronomy 28? What about it? Now, we're not going to prove this whole case today, okay? It's too much. It's too much information. It's too much going on to do it all in one day. But we're going to knock a dent in this slavery situation, right? Okay? We're going to get the identity of these Indians. We're going to get that straight. But as far as the land and all of that and the artifacts and all that, we got receipts for that too. Don't even worry about that. You know what I'm talking about? We're going to get you. So, we see that Christopher Columbus shipped a group of Indians called the Taino. Hold on. I don't know what's going on. He shipped a group of people called the Taino. Okay, I don't know why this thing don't want to act right. All of a sudden. Come on over here, why don't you? All right, the Taino. His first voyage, Columbus returned with 6 Taino. Now, we got to find out who are these Taino peoples? Who they is? Where they come from? Okay. Let's see this here. Like I said, I got plenty of these. I got plenty of these things. That I got to go through and check out here. Airwalk, Seminole. Indigenous people. Walk with me now. Walk with me. Because all of this is important. All of these screenshots is very important. I just had so many from different days and times because I've been on this for a minute now. I tried to organize them as best I could. So let's find out about this Taino situation. The Taino believed that they had originated from caves in a sacred mountain of Hispaniola. Okay. The Taino okay, here we go. Who were the Tainos and where did they come from? The Taino, a subgroup of the Arawakan Indians from northeastern South America, inhabited the Greater Antilles, Cuba, Jamaica, Hispaniola, and Puerto Rico. Tainos believed to have developed in the West Indies. The Taino believe that they are originated from caves in a sacred mountain of Hispaniola. Okay, this is the Tainos. Now, I got a little video. Got a little video about these Tainos. Like I said, you have to take everything with a grain of salt here.
Every time I say the word Taino as a Haitian, there's backlash. I get comments and messages like this. Haitians don't have Taino heritage. Mind you, this was in response to a video I released yesterday about Haiti and Jamaica. I referenced Tainos because the Tainos were the first inhabitants of both of our lands. True facts. Here's the reality. Taino history is Haitian history. Some people need to stop gatekeeping. The story of the Taino people belongs to Haitians just as much as it belongs to Dominicans, Puerto Ricans, Cubans. Our deeper skin tone doesn't disqualify us from being able to claim the rich history, culture, ancestry the Tainos left behind for us. Haitians, we're predominantly, overwhelmingly of African descent, and we are proud to be a Black nation. At the same time, we also recognize and celebrate our indigenous roots. The very name of our country, Haiti, is a Taino word meaning land of high mountains. It was the original name of our land. And so every time we're called by name, Haitian, Haitien, we are paying tribute to our indigenous roots. Our island, shared with the Dominican Republic, was the most populated with Tainos. And today, some Haitians can still trace a part of their ancestry back to Tainos. And that's because although the Tainos were declared extinct in 1565, some, very few, survived. They fled their Spanish colonizers and found refuge deep within the mountainous interior of our land. These Tainos created remote settlements, and when the French took over the West and began to import Africans, many of these Africans also ran away. We called them Maroons. Some of these Maroons found and joined the Taino settlement. Together, Africans and Tainos resisted slavery. It's no wonder Haiti's first army, the one that fought and beat the French, it was called the Indigenous Army. And when Haiti gained independence, one of our first constitution under pt.1 1816 extended citizenship to the native people. The commenter said that when the French came, all of the Tainos went to the east with the Spanish. But do you really think that when the 1697 Treaty of Wisswick was signed, all of the Tainos who had gained their freedom, they packed up their belongings and they moved to the east with their oppressors? Of course not. These Tainos stayed and they interacted with Africans, and through that interaction there was a cultural exchange.
Real quick, a lot of things she said needs to be addressed. For one, she's not in the complete understanding of everything. She said in the 1600s, the Tainos left with the Spanish on some, you know what, we don't like America, there's too much going on over here, we want to go to Spain. Didn't we just read they got enslaved and sent to Spain? They got enslaved. They didn't go on a planned trip. They got robbed and taken over there, right? Second thing, she talked about how the Africans mixed with the Tainos. This, my brothers and sisters, is a part of white supremacy. There is this narrative that these Indian tribes mixed with African. They say that to try to say this how these people got color. They only got color because they mixed with the slaves and they helped the slaves and they married within the slaves. We got to stop this narrative, okay? Because when we get into the laws, when we get into the different tribes, into the Seminoles that are black, they're going to say the same thing about the Seminoles. The Seminoles intermarried with the slaves, right? When we get into the black codes, when we get into the Indian Act, all of these things are about a particular group of people. That's why they have the same wording. Okay, like I said, we got plenty of receipts. I just want to address what this woman is talking about them mixing with Africans and all of this whole stuff. Listen, that's a no-no. Now, one thing we're going to have to realize too is that America is not Israel as a whole. Okay, it is my understanding and my belief at the moment. Now, it could change upon further facts, but my belief at the moment is that the Americas is the land of Shem. Now, if you go back into Genesis and even in Jasher specifically, you'll find out that after the flood, Noah and his sons came out of the ark. His sons went out and chose lands for themselves that would also be the lands of their descendants, right? The Bible describes the places they chose. It says that Japheth lives in the cold regions. It says that Ham lives in the hot regions. And it says Shem lives in a mixed region. In a region of hot and cold. Okay? So, we do know that Egypt and the land coincide with each other. If only separated by a body of water, right? The Red Sea. So, wherever Israel is, Egypt is right next to it. So, if this is America, if this is the land, everybody here ain't Israel for many reasons. For one, Egypt is here. For one, other Shemite tribes are here, right? If not South America, then up here somewhere. Whether it's northwest, northeast, Midwest, southeast, southwest. It could be split up in all these areas. That each family and each tribe had specific areas at one point. And then when all these kingdoms started coming, all of these beasts started coming up. Then we start to see a mixing of these lands and these people. So a lot of people have to understand that you might not be Israel completely. Okay, you might be an Egyptian. Okay, you might be an Assyrian, because the Assyrians are Shemites as well. You might be an Assyrian. Okay, you might be a what's the other people? What's the other people? After the Chaldeans, what's the people, man? Persian, the Persian Medes. You might be with the Persian Medes, which would make a lot of sense because all of us don't look alike, and all of us don't act alike. We ain't got the same, mindset about things. We ain't got the same morality. Our structures, our facial makeup and stuff ain't the same. A lot of y'all look like some of them Africans. I'm gonna be honest with you. A lot of you got real African type futuristics. A lot of you got Asiatic futuristics. But this is the thing. The true sons and daughters of Abraham is going to be those of the Ruach, right? Because at some point, flesh and blood is going to pass away. And the only thing that's going to be left is the Ruach. So don't get disheartened if it should come to pass that you not bloodline Israel, okay? Don't let that stop you. Because there's a lot of bloodline Israel going to hell, okay? So what you got to be is you got to be righteous. You got to be upright, okay? Don't let this information change you to where you give up on something or stop on something. No, press on even the further. And a lot of you got to start having your eyes set on somewhere else and start having it set on where you're at. You know what I'm saying? Because you might be where you're trying to go. That's all I got to say. But anyway, that's about enough for her. We going to move on up off of her, right? So, in looking up these Taino peoples, I started looking up the different tribes and things, right? I wanted to know about what other tribes is with the Tainos, because you could be an Indian tribe. That don't mean you ain't got brothers and sisters that's other tribes, because we see this in Israel. We see that each individual family could be its own tribe within a tribe, right? You got the tribe of Levi, but that's divided by sons, and those sons have their own families, and so on and so on and so on. Likewise, these tribes may very well be the same way, right? So, we need to see who are the friends of the Tainos. Let's see here. We need to find. I had a screenshot of the different tribes who was friends with them Taino boys. I got it somewhere. Like I said, we got a lot of different things going on up in here. At some point, we will speak about the different beliefs of these tribes and things. The different gods. Okay. It says that the Taino were a part of the Arawak tribes. So, as again, we see a big group and a subgroup. The big group is the Arawak, and the subgroup, one of the subgroups is the Taino. Right? Let's find out who the Arawak is. Don't Arawak kind of sound like Ruach a little bit? I'm just saying, I don't know. You tell me. Arawak was a group of indigenous peoples who lived in South America, Central America, and the Caribbean. The two largest Arawak tribes are the Taino and the Lacono. Now, it says the two largest. You know what that tells me? That there are others. Okay? That there are others, brethren. The subgroup, the Taino, the subgroup of the Arawak lived in the Greater Antilles and the Northern Lesser Antilles of the Caribbean. Lacono, the subgroup of the Arawak, lived mostly in South America. Now, they gonna tell you, of course, that it's all in South America. It's all South America and the Caribbean. Do you know you could take a small boat from Florida and get to Puerto Rico? And the Indians had trade with other Indians. They would go to the islands. You could get to these places in a very, very short time. So just like it is a highway, brethren, that goes all the way from Seattle all the way to South America. A highway. So let's not get it twisted that these people are able to travel to different countries in the Americas with no problem. Okay? Let's keep that in mind. So, I don't know why I got the stuff in here about HIV and stuff like that. But let's look at a picture of the Arawak here. This is an ancient drawing of the Arawak people. Don't they look like a sister? I'm just saying. Don't they look like a sister? Ain't she thicker than a snicker? And that's an Arawak man. This is an ancient American drawing. Man and woman of Guyana. This is one of the islands in the Caribbean. But it says Arawak. I don't know why it's doing that, baby. Arawak women photograph. That's what that is. All right. Let's look up the Lacono. Lacono are descended from a migratory. Migratory, that means they be moving. Okay? They be moving and stuff. That settled in the Guyanese lowlands after traveling down the Orinoco. The Lacono practiced cave art, including pictography, petrography, and tattooed themselves with symbols of their mighty ones. They also had high standards of personal hygiene and bathed often. We know these ain't white folks, okay? The Lacono, like the Guaro, were drawn to work on colonial plantations and came into close contact with the African population. Do you see how they trying to make these people black? That's how they got black. They was hanging with the Africans. We got to stop this narrative. We got to stop letting them hit us with the okie doke. Okay? They stay on us with the okie doke. Okay, so this is another thing here. Wow. So I did a thing where I did a thing on the groups of I gotta tie this in. Okay. We know that the Indians lived in different cities, right? One of the things that started me on this path was it was a Facebook reel about an old man from North Carolina. He was old, he was about 80, 90 some years old. And he told the story about how he was in slavery as a child or something. No, he was a sharecropper. And his daddy was a slave. And he spoke about how his daddy came from a city, right? I looked that city up, and in my mind, I'm like, this city got to have an Indian presence. It got to have an Indian presence because his daddy said that he met his mama on a plantation and that him and his mama came from separate cities. They got caught up in these cities and sent into slavery and bought on a plantation. So they was free before they got caught. So his dad was like, I'm going back to my hometown in Indiana, to a city in Indiana. So I looked that city up, the history of that city, and that city had a large Indian presence. You got to understand, they are removing black people and calling it Indian, and they replacing the image of a brown skinned Indian with the Asiatic Indian. Okay, so I looked up the Indian tribes of Indiana. I got them somewhere. Hold on. I'm sorry, y'all. This is very unorthodox presentation I'm doing. So screenshots does not lend well to presentations. So, that's the Indian tribes of Missouri. Where we at? Indian tribes of Indiana. Okay, look here. Black Indians. This is the list of black Indian tribes. African American, Atlanta Creole, black Seminoles, Seminole Indians. Okay. Brass ankles, Chestnut Ridge people, Indigenous peoples of the Americas. This is all Wikipedia saying this here. Okay. I said, what Indian tribes had black people in them, right? This says, among the Cherokees, Choctaws, Chickasaws, Creeks, and Seminoles, Africans were enslaved by Native Americans. Children of enslaved African women and Native American slave owners were also considered illegitimate. Like I said earlier, they're trying to say, because you have today many quote unquote black people claiming all of these tribes. You know, your grandma said she was part Cherokee, she was Choctaw, she part Creek Indian, she part Seminole, right? Many of us have grandmothers that spoke like this. And they try to say how this happened was the slaves slept with the Indians. We just showed you they had Indian slaves, right? We showed you they had Indian slaves. Not Indians had slaves, but Indians were slaves. And Indians worked on plantations. They worked on sugar plantations. Documented. So it's not going to say plainly everything you want it to say. You have to read between the lines. These people are Confederate. They have joined together to blot out the name of Yasharal, that it may no more be in remembrance. So everybody's in on it. These other nations you look to and say, well, they don't say that, they don't do that, they don't do. The beast has taken over the whole world. But the Most High has a law. And his law is that truth has to be found in the earth. Because if truth can't be found in the earth, that means he can't be found in the earth. And that means that you are without the opportunity for salvation. And he has not taken away the opportunity of salvation, so truth must remain in the earth. Howbeit, it can be up under a whole bunch of lies. Don't get to it. It can be up under a whole bunch of lies. And it is up under a whole bunch of lies. That's why he says those who have ears must hear, and those who have eyes must see. Righteous eyes, spiritually inclined eyes and ears. Because those that don't have the spiritually inclined eyes and ears, they just using their regular eyes and their regular ears, you ain't going to see much. And you ain't going to hear much. Not of truth anyway. So, they're saying that among the Cherokees, the Choctaws, the Chickasaws, and the Creek and Seminoles were found black people, or Africans, if you will. So, let's see here. I might just have to do all of these on a tab. So, there is something called the Gullah Geechee Wars, right? The Gullah Geechee Wars. Let's see what it's talking about here. The Gullah Geechee Wars were a series of conflicts fought by the Gullah Geechee people in the 1800s. The Gullah Geechee people are descendants of enslaved Africans from West and Central Africa who were brought to the coastal regions of North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. Gullah Geechee people are also known as the Gullah people. So, this is what we got to understand too, was that if the Indians are the people of the book, and if we are those people, and we largely inhabited this land, that the wars that were fought had to be disguised, right? Because if they want to blot us out of history, if they want our name to be no longer in remembrance, then they have to give us an alternate history. They have to give us an alternate people, as we see with this whole Jewish thing. You're not a Jew, but you're Jewish, right? You're not a native American. You're a African. You're African American. Ain't that so? Right? So let's get into this Gullah Geechee, right? That started in 1817. I got some things here about the Geechee Wars. Real quick, let's slide back to the no, that's not. What do we got here? This is something I found somewhere else talking about the Tainos. Okay, yeah. This is talking about the Taino people. This is what led me on a path to wars and things, where it spoke about the Taino rebellion. Okay? The Taino rebellion. Let's do something here, because I'm tired of all of these screenshots. I'm quite tired of the screenshot narrative. So let me share my whole screen and let's do a live study. A live study researching these things. Researching, looking up things. I'm sorry about the infinite screen you're going to see here for a second, but we got the... I don't know. Whoever's commenting, I appreciate you. Hold on a second. Let's look at the Taino rebellion. Let's look at it. Let's look at the Taino rebellion. Taino genocide. Let's look at the Taino genocide. The Taino genocide was committed against the Taino indigenous people of the Spanish during their colonization of the Caribbean by the Spanish during the 16th during their colonization of the Caribbean during the 16th century. The population of the Taino before the arrival of the Spanish on the island of Hispaniola in 1492, which Christopher Columbus baptized as Hispaniola, is estimated at between 10,000 to 1 million. That's a long range. They didn't know how many people was up in there. The Spanish subjected them to slavery, massacre, and other violent treatment after the last Taino chief was deposed in 1504. By 1514, the population had reportedly been reduced to just 32,000 Taino, and the number was reported at 200. And by 1802, they were declared extinct by the Spanish colonial authorities. I want to tell you something too. 1800 is about the time that these heathens really got a stronghold in the Americas. You're going to find out that the 1800s was the time when these heathens really took over America. Forget about them, signing the Declaration of Independence and all this whole stuff. The 1700s wasn't really that for real. The 1800s was when these folks really, really put their foot down and started burning cities. We still had cities. We still had places that we controlled. But let me tell you something. Them 1800s, we don't read about it. They were declared extinct by the Spanish colonial authorities. However, descendants of the Taino continue to live in their disappearance from records and was part of the fictional story created by the Spanish Empire with the intention of erasing them from history. What don't that sound like? Don't that sound like Psalms 83? That sounds like Psalms 83. Okay, let's go back. Let's go back and talk about the Gullah Geechee. You know what? Y'all can't even see this, can you? You can't. Yeah, you can. Because I shared the whole screen. See, that's how you do that. When you share the whole screen, it don't matter where you go. But anyway, it was something I did with the Gullah Geechee. Gullah people. They said the Gullah is slaves. No. The Gullah people was in South and North Carolina. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to find out what Indian tribes. See, I'm going to show you how to study. I'm going to show you. Let me learn you. Okay? You got to go to the Indian tribes of the Carolinas. I can't spell. We're going to get it. Indian tribes of the Carolinas, brethren. American Indian tribes in North Carolina. Matter of fact, let's go ancient. Okay? Sometimes you got to go ancient with it because they're going to play with you. You can't let them play with you. Okay? Let's see if they got the Wikipedia joint. Who were the American Indians of North Carolina? Prehistoric Carolinians. Paleo? What? Paleo Indians, perhaps the best way to begin to study. No, let's not do that. That ain't talking about what I want to talk about. Let's just go here and see what they're talking about here. Explore the history, culture, and traditions of the Native Americans. Ain't nobody got time for all this old extra. Okay. This is how we gonna tie some things in. The Yamisi War, 1715 to 1718. Okay? We got to understand some things. White folks come over here with the Indians, act like they friends, and then they start taking over. Certain Indians start fighting back. This is called a war. So you're going to get wars on the East Coast. You're going to get wars on the South in Florida. You got wars in Texas. We just read to you about how the Spanish took Indians from Mexico and Texas and sent them to Africa. Okay? So, matter of fact, here. The Yamisi War. The Yamisi War was a major 18th century conflict between the colony of Carolina and its trade partners, the Yamisi. Unscrupulous Indian traders cheated and mistreated the Native Americans. On Good Friday. Ooh, is that why it's Good Friday? maybe it ain't got nothing to do with Hamashiach dying on the cross, as they say. Maybe it got to do with them deciding to fight these Indian people. Well, or the Indian people deciding to fight them. On Good Friday, 1715, the Yamises struck. They killed the traders in their midst and launched attacks against coastal plantations. Despite its name, the Yamisi War also involved the Cherokees, the Creeks, the Choctaws, and the Santees, and the Wakamas. In a far-ranging rebellion from the Savannah River to Charleston, the turning point came with the colonists defeating the Yamises at the battles of Port Royal and Salkehatchie. I don't know what it says. The worst war was over by April 1716, and brought to a close in 1718. No English colony came as close to eradication by a native population as South Carolina during the Yamisi War. So, we got to get an understanding about this Yamisi War, right? There was a king over these Indians. There was a king over these Indians, a prince, if you will, that ended up going. See, all of these wars happened around the same time. This how the heathen come into power in the 1800s. In the 1700s, he was killing Indians. Look, despite many treaties, the settlers continued to encroach and lay claim to native lands during the French-Indian War between 1754-1763 and American Revolution 1775 to 1783. The Native Americans took sides, often with disastrous consequences. They had hoped that their alliances would protect their access to their lands, but many times they were on the wrong side of the outcomes and suffered greatly. Okay. So, it's something I'm looking for. It's something I'm looking for. The Carolinians. There was a certain Indian group that I had found that he was the king of the thing. Hold on, brethren. Is this what I'm looking for? Oh, Stono Rebellion is what we're looking for, brethren. We're looking for the Stono Rebellion. Look at that. It's right there. What is the Stono Rebellion? Stono Rebellion, also known as Cato's Conspiracy, Cato's Rebellion, was a slave revolt that began on September 9th, 1739. Now, in the colony of South Carolina, didn't they just say something about a war happening around that time? What did they just say?
I think it was 1715 through 1718.
That was the Ramesi War. That was the Ramesi War. Yamisi War. Let's get back to the Yamisi War real quick. Yamisi Indian War, yeah, it was from 1715 to 1717. Now, This is the Indians. We just told you about the Gullah Geechees. Okay. Let's see. When did the Gullah people, when did they get to the Carolinas? When did the Gullah people get there? A subgroup of Africans predominantly live in low country, United States, South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, Florida. This also where the Seminoles are. Okay. This also where all of the black quote unquote tribes is at. Okay, but where's the time frame of this? It don't say when they got there. When did the Gullah people arrive? Oh, here we go. The Gullah got a website. Tell it, Gullah. When did the Gullah culture begin? The Gullah culture began. We first explore the origins of the Gullah people. The roots of the Gullah culture can be traced back to the 17th and 18th century. That means from the 16 to the 1700s, when African slaves were brought to the southeastern United States. Now, listen, this is what we got to understand. We already talked about this. These heathens want to keep this African narrative, but you got to rebel against it. Okay, you got to rebel against it. Don't let them get you. When African slaves were brought, the eastern United States, particularly the coastal areas of South Carolina, Georgia, and the Sea Islands, the Caribbean, brethren. These enslaved Africans primarily hailed from West and Central Africa regions, rich in cultural traditions and languages. We just saw Spain had a whole thing about slavery. They got flooded. They treated the Gullah Geechee people bad. We see the Carolinas just got flooded. The Gullah people were brought to work on plantations that specialized in rice, indigo, and cotton. The slaves chosen for these plantations were skilled rice growers and expertise that was in high demand in the market. How you gonna be a rice grower? Skilled. They don't grow rice in Africa. Not that I know of. But anyway. So they say that these Gullah people came around the 16 and 1700s, right? We also see that in the 18th century, these wars start to pop off, right? Which brings us to the Stono Rebellion. The Stono Rebellion was the largest slave rebellion. Now, you know what? I had left off from the from something else. Let's go back. We gonna come back to the Stono. First, we have to understand the Indian tribes in the Carolinas. I'm sorry, y'all. So much to talk about. Ancient Indian tribes in the Carolinas. Okay. Oh, the problem was that they didn't list them like that. They act like they don't want to list the tribes. Okay, let's see here. Just give me a list, why don't you? Okay, here is a couple of the tribes of the Carolinas. We got the Cherokee. We got the Tuscarora. We got the Lumbi. Here we go. I mean, it's more than that. It's got to be more than that. The Cherokee, the Tuscarora, North Carolina. South Carolina is the Lumbi. Okay, well, let's see about the Lumbi tribe. The Lumbi tribe are Native American community. The Lumbi take their name from the Lumbi River. Lumbi River, the Suan, Black River. The yellow fever epidemic of 1862 and 1863 killed many slaves working on the construction of Fort Fisher, Wilmington. That's how they killed a lot of these people. Well, y'all said he was going to attack with the sword, with the pestilence, with famine. We just read about the Tainos getting starved out. And the what is that, the sword, pestilence, starving. I guess the sickness is the pestilence. So anyway, the people got sick and died. Okay, let's go back here. Let's go back here to the Stono Rebellion of the Carolinas. The leader of the rebellion, Jimmy, was a literate enslaved man in some reports. However, he is referred to as Cato, and lately was held by Cater family, who lived near the Ashley River and North Stono River. He led 20 other enslaved Congolese who may have been former soldiers in an armed march south of the Stono River. They were bound for Spanish Florida, where successive proclamations had promised freedom for fugitives from British North America. Jimmy and his group recruited nearly 60 other slaves and killed more than 20 whites before being intercepted and defeated by the South Carolina militia near Adesto. Survivors traveled another 30 miles before the militia finally defeated them a week later. Most of the captured slaves were executed. The surviving few were sold to markets in the West Indies in response to the rebellion. The General Assembly passed the Negro Act of 1740, which restricted slaves' freedoms and placed a moratorium on importing new slaves. Okay, now let's get into some of these laws that was passed. Okay. The Negro Act of 1740. A comprehensive act made it illegal for enslaved Africans to move abroad, assemble in groups, raise food, earn money, learn to write. Additionally, owners were permitted to kill rebellious slaves if necessary. The act remained in effect until 1865.
I have a question.
Yeah, baby.
If we talking about the Indian, why they calling them Negroes, or why they passing this act on them?
Well, because this in particular was not a Indian war.
Oh, okay. But it's part of the.
It's well, I came here because it's a war that happened in North and South Carolina.
Right. The Stono Rebellion, correct?
Yes. When we have these large Indian groups in the 1700s still there.
Okay.
So what I'm trying to correlate is that how is it this large Indian presence and a large slave presence at the same time fighting against the colonies? Right? You got the Stono, uh, uh, and then you have these Gullah people, right? The Gullah people, the Gullah Geechee Wars.
So just right as you're saying, right? They're saying a big slave presence, all the while there's a large Indian presence, right, at the same time.
In these same cities. I mean, in
cities, right?
cities and states. Yeah.
Right. So that's still, I guess that adds to my question that why are they passing something called a Negro Act in the same places as these Indians and at the same time as the presence of slaves? Like if the Indians are the slaves, why pass it the Negro Act is what I'm saying. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, it's other acts and stuff. I'm gonna get into it with the Indian Act and all of that, man. Just this stuff is so everywhere because I have all these screenshots that's not showing up. So I'm having to go back and to find all this stuff, and it's not showing up how I want it to be there. Gullah. Okay, South America. Now all of a sudden they ain't got the Gullah Geechee Wars in there. When it was in there before. On the phone, it shows up different. Like it's upsetting. It's upsetting. And it's making me look crazy.
Pull up the screenshots and see.
See here, it says that the Gullah Wars. Wow, man.
Hey, that was big enough if you just read it.
Okay, here we go. Okay, the Gullah Wars were a series of battles that took place between 1739 and 1858 and were primarily led by African ancestors of the Gullah Geechee people. also known as the Stono Rebellion. So they said it got stopped in like 2 years, but here it went on for how many years is that? 118 years. They was fighting wars for 118 years, but here they try to act like it ended in here they say it started in 1739 and ended as early as like 1740 because it says that they got hit with these people and that they had put a stop to it. So yeah, getting kind of off track about the Indian and the slave thing. So I wanted to show the contrast between laws passed about these people, right? We just read about the Negro Act. Let's find out about some other acts and some other laws and things that were passed. Let's look into the black codes. What were the black codes? Black codes, the numerous laws adopted in the states of the former Confederacy after the American Civil War that were intended to maintain white supremacy in those places, enacted in 1865 and in 1866. The black codes were designed to replace social controls previously exerted over black Americans by slavery. Now, didn't we just look up the Negro Act? Negro Act was passed in the province of South Carolina in 1740. Okay. Now, let's look up the Indian Act. Now, you see how all of this is so close together here. The Indian Act, Act of Parliament, that concern registered Indians, their bands, their system of Indian reserves, first passed in 1876, still in force with amendments. It is primarily a document that defines how the government of Canada interacts with 614 first. Hold on, that's not what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for nothing in Canada. Pardon me, y'all. Let's see something. Okay, the Trail of Tears was the forced displacement of approximately 60,000 people of the five civilized tribes between 1830 and 1850. Remember what I said about the 1800s being when these heathens really started taking over. And additional thousands of Native Americans and their enslaved African Americans within that were ethnically cleansed by the United States government. This was what I was looking for here, the Indian Removal Act, right? No, it is a part of the Indian Removal Act. Members of the Cherokee, Muskogee, Seminole, and Chickasaw. These were all the Indians on the East Coast. We just read about this, right? These were the people in North and South Carolina, in Georgia, and in Florida, right? And Choctaw nations were forcibly removed from their ancestral homelands in the southeastern United States. We just talked about this. The newly designated Indian Territory west of the Mississippi. So all of these Indian tribes were moved from the east to the west. Now, let's look at something else. Let's look at the uh what is it called? Not the black codes, but the what's them things, man? What's the other law? Jim Crow. Jim Crow laws were state and local laws introduced into the southern United States in the late 19th, that's the 1800s, and 20th centuries that enforced racial segregation, being a pejorative term for an African American. The last of the Jim Crow laws were overturned in 1965. Formal and informal racial segregation policies were present in their areas in the United States as well. Even let's skip on down here. The Jim Crow laws mandated racial segregation in all public facilities in the United States of the former Confederate States of America and in some others. Uh, South Freedmen Democrats. This ain't getting to what I want. There was a name for what the Pope did, what the Spanish had in Florida. Maybe it ain't the Black Codes, but let's see. Let's see what this is. I don't know what's going on. I'm playing a video, babe. I don't know what it's saying. Babe. Who is that? Sweet. I guess it's man. No, I'm hearing snowing. The boy snow like a wrong man. What's that? Oh, it ain't no sound on the thing.
Codes makes all of this profoundly clear.
No, I'm hearing snowing. I'm sorry, y'all. I didn't share the audio. I'm having to come back, having to come back and do it right.
Black Americans and keeping them enslaved.
We're talking about the black codes
Hi,
here, y'all.
I'm Clint Smith, and this is Crash Course Black American History. There are all sorts of ways that societies restrict people's movement. For example, people can put gates and fences around their homes and communities. Or there are traffic cones that tell us where we can and can't drive, even though sometimes I might accidentally run over them. I'm working on it. But some methods that society uses to restrict the movements of people are far more sinister, far more serious, and based on distorted beliefs, have no sincere interest in the safety of those people. What I'm thinking of, in this case, are something called slave codes. Slave codes were based on the belief that Black Americans were just an economic investment. They were purposefully designed to condone harming Black Americans and keeping them enslaved. Though some textbooks on slavery and slave codes refer to enslaved people simply as workers, they were not simply workers. They were treated as an underclass, and the legal system perpetuated that underclass status for economic and prejudicial reasons. Learning about slave codes makes all of this profoundly clear. Slave codes were laws and policies developed during the colonial period to restrict the movement and freedoms of Black people. Though they were called slave codes, many times they were applied to free Black people as well. Remember that the distinction between Negro and enslaved was essentially meaningless during this time. The primary reason the slave codes were implemented was to explicitly and legally reinforce the racial hierarchy within the colonies. Slave codes were a method of protecting the investment of white enslavers by restricting the lives of enslaved people in almost every imaginable way. The codes restricted enslaved people's ability to move around or engage in commerce that would make them financially independent. They basically restricted the very opportunities that would allow them to live with even relative freedom. When there were hints of enslaved people questioning their status, or even the possibility of someone planning a revolt, new slave codes were quickly passed to prevent such a thing from happening. Virginia was the first of the 13 colonies to implement large-scale slave codes. Since the United States was not quite the United States yet, each colony had their own version of these codes. At the time, they were not yet even referred to as slave codes, but even without the formal title, their purpose remained the same: to fundamentally restrict the rights of Black Americans, free and enslaved, and to explicitly deny them the rights afforded to white members of society. Let's take a look at an example. In 1662, Virginia passed this statute: whereas some doubts have arisen whether children got by any Englishman upon a Negro woman should be slave or free, be it therefore enacted and declared by this present Grand Assembly that all children born in this country shall be held bond or free only according to the condition of the mother, and that if any Christian shall commit fornication with a Negro man or woman, he or she so offending shall pay double the fines imposed by the former act. After Elizabeth Key's case in 1656, which we talked about last episode, the Virginia House of Burgesses passed this official law. It mandated what's known as partis sequitur ventrum, determining one's enslaved status based on their mother's labor status, as the legal method to determine whether an individual is enslaved or not. Some scholars, such as Jennifer L. Morgan, posit that it was actually Key's freedom suit that drove the Virginia House of Burgesses to create this law in the first place, a law that was also designed to discourage intimate interracial relations between black and white people in the colonies. Virginia didn't just stop there. In 1705, Virginia passed another law dedicated to regulating the movement and behavior of enslaved people. It was called an Act Concerning Servants and Slaves. This act banned black people from owning white servants and penalized those who presided over the marriage between a white and black person. It banned...
All right, y'all. It's time to get to the nitty-gritty. I just found a place to get to what I'm looking for. This is my Facebook page. I posted something a while back about all of this, and now I want to get into it from this way. Okay, there we go. The Indian Removal Act. Now, we just heard about the what was that we just looked at? The Black Codes, right? Let's look at the Indian Removal Act of 1830. Was signed into law on May 28, 1830 by the United States President Andrew Jackson. The law, as described by Congress, provided for an exchange of lands with the Indians residing in any of the states and territories and for their removal west of the Mississippi. We just read about this in the Trail of Tears. So, let's look at this. It was a migration of black people around that same time. Let's see here. Now, we see they just did the Indian Act in 18 what? Indian Removal Act was passed in 1830. Indian Removal Act passed in 1830. to 1850. During this time, the Gullah Geechee Wars is going on. The Gullah Geechee Wars is going on 1835 to 1842. Right? Indian Removal Act, Gullah Geechee Wars, in the same area that the Indian Removal Act is happening in. Okay? The Indian Removal Act was for North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida. The Gullah Geechee Wars is North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida. They having a war with the colonies. They passing laws to remove the Indians at the same time. Right? The Black Codes passed from 1865 to 1866, which he just read in the video. They was passing laws as early as the 1600s. So, I said in the start of the 1870s there. But let's look at when did when did blacks start moving to the Midwest? Because the Trail of Tears took the Indians from the East Coast and moved them out west, right? Let's see, when did let's say blacks migrate to the West? I think it happened before that. The Great Migration. Okay, here we go. You see how, man, you have to type certain stuff in order to get what you're looking for, because they just said it was a great thing in the 1900s. But it say, with oppressive conditions in the South, African Americans began relocating to the West starting in the 1870s. This is right after, mind you, they just passed, right after passing the Indian Removal Act, right? Right after passing the Black Codes between 1850 to 1860, right after the Trail of Tears. I'm sorry, the Trail of Tears, 1830 to 1850, which all of these years could probably be like changed around for real. Black Codes between 1865 and 1866. So with all this, with Indians and black people, all these things happened against Indians and black people. You got the Gullah Geechee Wars around this same time, right? Or prior to this, right? The Gullah Geechees end up losing in the end and getting shipped out, right? Because the Indians get shipped out in the Indian Removal Act of 1830. So you see how in this span of the 1800s, they have quote unquote freed slaves, at the same time passed all these laws, and at the same time removed all the Indians from the East Coast to the West. And then we see this great migration of black people into the West in the 1870s. Why? Moving to Kansas and surrounding states in search for a better life that was free from domestic terrorism. What's that? The Klan. White people coming up, raiding stuff, flooding towns. It was something else I had wanted to point out about this whole thing with these laws and stuff. It's all connected. That's what I'm trying to show you. So, in this Trail of Tears, between 1830 and 1850, conveniently, 100,000 American Indians from Michigan all the way to Florida and in between gets moved all the way out west, right? They get moved all the way out west, right? In treaties and all of this stuff. At the same time, or shortly after that, right? Shortly after that, with this you got Indians moving in the same places that black people moved to. They said the black people moved to Kansas. Before you get to Kansas, you got Missouri. So apparently, Missouri Native American tribe gave Missouri its name because they lived in confluence of Missouri. The Indian Removal Act of 1830 forced most indigenous people in Missouri. Well, they kicked them out of Missouri. And moved them where? Where did they move them to? Oklahoma, Nebraska, and Kansas? Everywhere you see an Indian presence, you're going to see a black presence. Everywhere you see a black presence, you're going to see an Indian presence. Just for fun, let's look up Indian wars in the Carolinas, because I don't think we have yet. Yeah, we did. That was the I think it's the Soho or the Coho, whatever that was. Oh, I be spelling wrong. In the 1700s, Tuscarora War, 1711. So they would try to act like that these Indians got replaced with slaves and say that this war, the Tuscarora War, Tuscarora War, that these Indians that fought in this got replaced with slaves. The Tuscarora tribe of the Iroquoian speaking Indians led by King Hancock in the south of the region. Tuscarora War erupted to land encroachment by colonists, trade disputes, and actions of some settlers in enslaving some of the Tuscarora Indians. John Lawson, surveyor general of North Carolina, turned a blind eye to these activities and was captured and executed by the Tuscarora tribe in 1711, which started the war. Chief Hancock enlisted the help of Pamplico. I don't want to get into all this old stuff. So it was a succession of war. The Tuscarora War led into the Yamasee War, right? And the Yamasee War History of timeline of the Scarlet War. American Indian Wars. Let's just look at it. Sand Creek.
What's up at DQ? 2 sauced and tossed chicken strip.
Oh, we don't need you, buddy. When did this happen? 1864. That's out of the time. But see, this is in Colorado. Remember, this is after the whole after the black migration that happened. What's the thing about the black migration? Negro Act 1740. I forgot what I did with the black migration thing. Black migration in the 1800s. Black migration. Now this ain't there. Are they listening to me or something? Are they changing? I just looked up this exact same thing, and it had how blacks left in the 1800s. I don't know. This ain't even what I just had. Now it don't want to come up what I searched for. So anyway, this has been part 1. Obviously, I got to go back and do this stuff again because I realize now that it's not sharing how I want to. I didn't have all the information I needed to have in the places I needed to have it. And I got to do that over again. Anyway, I showed y'all that Indians were in fact enslaved, right? Indians were in fact sent into Africa, sent into Europe as far back as the 1400s. And we see that the Indian tribes have a Negro presence in them. They claim that it's due to them mixing with that the black presence in Indian tribes is due to them mixing with slaves. But as we see in the photos behind me, that it's plenty of photos of 100% Negroid Indians, right? 100% Negroid. They don't look mixed with no Asians. They don't look mixed with white. They look 100% Negro, right? Like I said, this is part 1. I knew this was going to be a long thing in trying to bring out. I will go back and probably redo a lot of this with the screenshots and the presentations of it or whatever. But I made a statement that I had receipts for what I was saying, so I wanted to present them to you. I wanted to present them better than I did, but I presented them right. I showed you that the Indians were slaves in the Americans, albeit in the islands or whatever, in Jamaica, in Haiti, in Puerto Rico. I'm pretty sure you've never heard these things, right? I'm pretty sure you have never heard about American Indians being slaves in Haiti, being slaves in Puerto Rico, right? We've been taught that the slaves got there because that's where the slave ship stopped first on its way here, right? Whereas instead, the narrative is that Columbus and the colonizers got to these places, found natives there, killed and enslaved them, and sent them to Europe and sent them to Africa. Why would you ever send a slave to Africa if your whole narrative is that you getting slaves from Africa? Help me understand that. If your largest slave port is Spain, why are you sending slaves to Spain? Not only a slave port as in like this is where uh 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 you ship slaves. No, this is where you receive slaves. Okay? They try to tell us that's where they ship them from. We ship them from Africa, ship them from Spain to these islands. No, no. You receive them from these islands. You receive them from the Americas to these ports, to the slave port in Spain, to the slave port in West Africa. That's how the Negroid people in Spain, the Negroid people in Africa, that's how they got there. Is my premise. And I've shown you documentation of American, quote unquote, American Indians being enslaved in those places. I showed it to you. I gave it to you, pulled it up. This is they stuff. This is white people stuff, historian stuff. This ain't stuff that Brandon just made up and just said. No, I showed it to you. I showed you, albeit poorly. You know what I'm saying? Not as efficient as it will be, most I willing. But I showed you how the laws passed and the wars fought against the Indians and against the quote unquote slaves were all around the same time period. From 1717, as far as the slaves being documented as having laws passed against them and them unifying in wars, and the Indians having wars in the same region from North Carolina to South Carolina to Georgia to Florida. All had laws passed against both groups. All had wars fought against both groups between 1715 and 1860, 1870, right? So That's just in the South. We're going to get into the Midwest. We're going to get into up north. We're going to get into out west, out to Cali and all that, because it's black Indians everywhere. Now, I'm not saying all of these Indians are Israelites. I'm not saying that. But I am saying all of these Indians, or most of these Indians, are melanated. They melanated. And all of these Indians were the ones who were enslaved. Okay? I know it's a narrative of, yeah, the Indians was black, but they were still bringing slaves from Africa. No, I don't believe that. I don't believe that whatsoever, because that's trying to keep some kind of hope alive that we come from Israel. I believe we do come from Israel. I just believe Israel ain't where we think it is. Okay. I know what a lot of you gonna say it as well. You're gonna say that we're supposed to be kicked out of the land. We're supposed to be in captivity. I say two things to that. For one, captivity is not being enslaved, by and large. Captivity is not being sovereign. Okay? The people was in captivity when they had their own land, when they was in their own soil. You know why they were in captivity? Because they were subject to other nations. They were captive. Captive is being held against one's own will. And the reason why you're being held against your own will, because your will ain't stronger than the one who's holding you. You're subject to somebody. And that's what happened to Israel ever since the rise of the Assyrians. Okay? When the Assyrians, no, really, to be honest with you, it happened with the Philistines. Saul and David fought off the Philistines and won their sovereignty. Solomon rested in the sovereignty and ruled in the sovereignty. His sons, well, his grandsons maybe, I would say, ended up losing it. Okay? First, Northern Kingdom lost their sovereignty completely to the Assyrians. No, to be honest with you, they both were subject, because Hezekiah paid tribute. Hezekiah paid taxes to the king of Assyria. So their sovereignty started with the Philistines. They got their sovereignty back under Saul and David, right? Really under David, but Saul put a hurting on him. David finished it. Solomon walked into peace. His sons lost it because the Assyrians came up. When the Assyrians came up, they put them both under subjection. Okay, now, that's the captivity. As far as being in the land, but not in the land. It's my understanding and belief right now that the actual land of Israel would be in the Midwest outward. Midwest westward, right? So that's from anywhere from Missouri west, because the Missouri River, the Mississippi and Missouri River cuts somewhere through North Missouri. And everything west of that is where I believe Israel is, right? There are mountains over there. Okay, that's where the Rocky Mountains is at, Denver, Colorado. This is also where you see Oklahoma. You see now there's a difference between cut off from the entire land and being cut off from Jerusalem. Jerusalem is really where we cut off from, right? We cut off from Jerusalem and the temple and the priesthood and all. These are the things that were stripped from us. Everything else, I think we can still be in and still not have. Because what's the point in having a piece of something and not what's most important? What's the point in having your steering wheel, but you ain't got the car? You ain't got the engine. You ain't got the transmission. You know what I'm saying? You got the steering wheel. You ain't got no car. You got the steering wheel. So us living in places that Israel was allotted to, the children of Israel were allotted, is not the same as having our sovereignty. Because ain't no point in having your sovereignty and you ain't got Jerusalem. Jerusalem is what you was promised. Jerusalem is the land where the Most High set his name. Is his inheritance where his people were going to dwell. Jerusalem is. That's why you had to go to Jerusalem 3 times a year. Forget about other places you own, other places you rule. 3 times a year, if you a male Yasharal, you get to Jerusalem. That's the prize, right? And that would be, by and large, as I understand it at this time, the Utah area. And I've looked into this. Utah has one of the lowest black populations in all of America. I think it's in the single digits. It's about 6 to 7% African American in Utah. Probably less than that. So not only that, it could be even in Nevada, right? There's a process called desertification. That's when a green, lush land becomes a desert. If you look over in Africa now, in the Sahara Desert, it's starting to turn green. A lot of people calling it prophetic and all this old stuff. Yeah, I'm looking for Nevada to turn green, to be honest with you. I'm looking for Nevada to turn green. Because if Nevada turn green, then I think we're going to have... Matter of fact, let's do a quick little study. Let's see if Nevada been turning green. Let's just see real quick. Let's take a gander at it. Let's see if Nevada turned green. Let's see if it's turning green. You see what I'm saying? You see what I'm talking about here? You see the whole thing, desertification? Okay, it's a real thing. I've been on this for some years now. But it's not talking about the Nevada. Not talking about the Nevada. It's talking about other places. Other deserts all over the world is turning green. We see it's happening in Australia. We see it's happening in the Sahara, which I just talked about. Okay, we see it's happening in China. Deserts are turning green. Okay, wherever you have a desert, you're gonna have a low habitation, meaning people are not living there. You know why? Because stuff ain't growing, crops ain't growing, water is not prevalent heavily enough to sustain a large population. So what I'm looking for is the Nevada desert to turn green here. Let's see. It said now here on the side of the thing, it's saying in the deserts of North America, something incredible is happening. These arid lands are turning into lush green wetlands, and it's all because of a very secretive creature who only comes out at night, and the results are astounding. So listen, we don't really want to get into that. What we want to get into is the literature of it. We want to read about it, not talk about it. Unusual shift in weather has turned the Sahara green. What is What is the desert called in Nevada? Right. She don't know. What is the desert called over there? Somebody in the comments, help me. What is the desert called in Nevada? The Mojave. Let's look at the Mojave. See, is the Mojave Desert turning green? It's not, apparently. It's not looking good. Apparently, it's getting worse. So I'm looking for the Mojave Desert to turn green. Okay, that's what I'm looking for. All these other places turning green, that's all fine and good. I'm looking for the Mojave. But anyway, that's what I'm talking about, is that it's very possible. It's very possible that this is the land. This is the land. This is where it's at. Shout out to Israelite Polite. They have been in the comments chopping it up with us. He says many American Indian languages are forms of broken Hebrew. Yes, that is indeed. That is indeed. It says James Adair lived with the southeastern Indians for 40 years that confirmed that we kept Hebrew customs. Right. Told out. It's a great question. That part, Cook G says they recycled the most rebellious Indians to sugarcane plantations in the Caribbean and the ships, and then shipped them back to the colonies as Africans. Hey, that is quite a possibility. My sister Taniqua said a lot of us, as I said earlier, a lot of us got Indian in our family. Okay, that's what they call me. That's what they call me. They said, boy, you got all that hair, man. You must got some Indian in your family. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. They say I look exotic. I look exotic to you? I don't know. But anyway, that's what we got, man. I've been on this thing almost 3 hours holding y'all up. Shout out to everybody. Hit that like button. Go ahead and hit it, as you should. Everybody joining me over there on the Life of an Israelite page. But yeah, that's what we got. That's what we got for today. Like I said, my apologies, Salakia, for my lack of presentation. All of this is new. I've never shared this many screenshots, and I have all these screenshots because I'm on the road all the time. I work all the time, except on Shabbat. This is when I'm off and I'm resting and I'm chilling. I ain't even resting that much because I'm talking to y'all. So I have to screenshot because I'm not on my laptop. So I research and things. I be driving, screenshotting, driving, reading. I be on jobs, screenshotting, doing stuff. You know, I have to do everything I do. I do it on the move and on the go. So I rushed to put this out. I did. I kind of rushed to do it, but you get the gist of it. So when I come back with part 2, and it'll be way more refined, way more professional and whatnot. You'll see. You know what I'm saying? So, but I hope this has been enough to kind of tide you over, to kind of get started, to start doing your research. Start checking on stuff yourself. Like my brother said, man, do it yourself. You know what I'm saying? Research it yourself. Okay? Don't be dependent on folks to do everything for you. Okay? Do some stuff for yourself. Okay? So yeah, that's what it is, man. All praise to the Most High, the creator of the heavens and the earth, the seas and everything in them. And thanks to his being, Yahushua HaMashiach. And shalom, shalom to the brethren. What up to everybody else? It's 12 tribes.